in-depth race recaps,
He's shown speed, he's shown dominance at other racetracks.
pit stops and strategy,
Hell yeah, boys. Let's go. Race strategy, man.
fantasy racing insights,
Talking about being a team in the summer. We did it. Good job, boys.
your weekly home for everything Ryan Blaney and Team 12.
Good job, Timmy. Here's to many more, fellas. Thank you.
This is the Team Blaney podcast.
Let's go race for a championship.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 179 of the Team Blaney podcast. My name is Adam Rogers, and alongside me is co-host Steve Mez. This week, we are here to break down Ryan Blaney's run in the Cookout 400 at Martinsville Speedway. Steve, welcome back to another episode of the show, and you should be welcoming me back, as I was away, away for a week, on vacation, enjoying the Bahamas and the race at Homestead. I enjoyed it as much as I could, and a nice long weekend in South Florida and out on a cruise ship. And from what I understand and from what I watched, another Team Mez takeover episode kept things afloat while I was away.
Yeah, we didn't have as much to talk about as we wanted to, and we had to do a little pep talk to ourselves like usual. And I shouldn't say that, because it's not going to be like usual. We're up and onward and upward now. So back to the upward trajectory. But yeah, it was good. It was a good time. I'm glad everybody tuned in last week. Like I said, we're doing this now live on Facebook and live on YouTube and TikTok also. But the Facebook and the YouTube are great because they're recorded and you guys can watch them during the week anytime. You can just pull up Team Blaney page on Facebook and it'll be right there or in the feed. So, if you miss us on Monday night at 8:30, check us out during the week. Or if you're watching right now, tell a friend.
Absolutely. So going into this weekend, Martinsville Speedway for Ryan Blaney, I feel like the last few weeks with Phoenix, with Homestead, and then especially this race, entered with like super high bar, the highest of hopes. They're going to get some things turned around. We faced some engine issues a couple of times in the last few races, but it's like, all right, Martinsville, he's dominated in the fall. He runs well there in the spring. They don't seem to hit on it in the spring for some weird reason, whether it's true or not, or whether it's just by chance. And but still came in with high expectations. Maybe they can get this win and lock themselves into the playoffs. But on Sunday morning, I kind of reset. I was like, okay, in reality, it's hard to win cup races, regardless of what the track record there, which he's had an awesome record at Martinsville over the last few years. But I reset and I was like, they just really need to stop the bleeding. 3 DNFs in a row with those engine issues, with a crash. They needed a solid points day, get stage points, and get a solid finish. A win would be amazing, but it was something I couldn't expect. And there's still parts of the race, though. And we've had these in the last few years, even before the championship year, where a team can run in the top 10, run laps in the top 10, top 5, and still be an incredibly frustrating race because you know what they're capable of. They're capable of more. And it's still funny thinking all the way back to following Dave. And we say this all the time when we're bringing this up, that, if Dave got a top 10, it was like a victory. It was like a total celebration for all us fans back then. But with Ryan, it's like, top 10, top 15 at maybe the worst is the expectation. After winning the championship, top 5, top 10 is the expectation. And then going to a place like Martinsville, it's hard not to get your hopes up. So I still might need a little bit more of a pep talk, because I feel like there are a lot of fans that were the team included, I'm sure, just frustrated by the run a little bit. But I think we have to look at the positive side of things, that the points, I think they actually gained some points overall in the standings, and they're pointing the ship in the right direction. And hopefully we can lean on that as they move forward over the next several races and try to get things back in, like we said, the right direction.
There's one thing that's important that happened with the finish and so forth, and I'll explain a little more when we're talking about qualifying, because it is kind of the shift that they needed to have with a good finish. So But Martinsville spring and Martinsville fall are always too different for some reason, and different in such a way that's just crazy. I mean, I know there's more drama on the fall race being the last one before the championship, and you're going from 8 to 4, and you're trying to see who's going to miss the cut, who's going to make the cut. But there seems like there's just more passing going on in the fall race, and in the spring race. When we've been there in the spring race a couple times, and my wife to attest to just almost wanting to fall asleep. I put up a TikTok today that I had taken a video, like I've tried to do a couple times now, of the in-car camera, and I sped it up 3 times as fast, just so it could get what's basically about 4 laps in about 30 some seconds, right? And it's just the same thing at both ends all the way. You can't get to the next guy. And watching yesterday, and we'll talk about it in the race report too, everybody's on the same lap time. And I say within a tenth of a second, and you've got to be 3 to 4 tenths of a second better to get to the guy in the corner to move him if you need to move him. And at that point, guys know that if you can do that, then they know to get out of your way too, because they know that you can get there. A bunch of times what we saw was pinball action. The guy 3 guys deep going a little too deep in there, and then into the next guy, and the next guy spinning somebody out. But an actual like bump and run pass, the way that you're traditionally supposed to do it, is based on the fact that you are actually quicker than the guy in front of you, and nobody was. Huge statistic before we even get to the race itself. Last 50 laps of the race, the top 10 guys all stayed pretty much in position except one guy, and that's Logano, who moved his way into the top 10, and he did it with 42 lap newer tires than everybody else in the top 10. Nobody else actually changed position in the top 10 except for when Logano passed them. That's it. So if Logano didn't come on new tires, we were like looking at 50 laps. The last 50 laps of the race was paint drying. And that's not what NASCAR wants, I don't think, and it's definitely not what the fans want. And somebody would like to have seen Denny get challenged at the end, but nobody was any faster than anybody else. It's just they're stuck in a box right now that they'll have to figure out.
Yeah, and it's interesting how I wanted to bring up this topic of, and maybe it's better for after the race recap, that like, can we get through now? It seems like the 1.5 weeks were fine. Maybe there's some times where people are complaining about wanting some sort of a rule change or something based on something that happened on track. But it's just so tiring that, like, in the NASCAR world, we can't like get through a weekend without like, this rule needs to be changed, the tire needs to be changed, the track needs to be changed. Like, I'm trying to think of any other sports, like, baseball, football. I mean, I know they're hard to compare them to motorsports, but it's like maybe pass interference calls and things like that people are complaining about a little bit, but they put a lot of that more on the referees. It's like there is a good rule there, it just needs to be enforced properly. Now the Xfinity Series race is a whole nother story about what happened in that fiasco. But it's like, it's so tiring, because as you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, wonder what the big difference was, because the fall race was good. They brought that soft tire that did wear, and it did wear in this race as well. But I'm like, was it the weather? I can't remember back to the fall race. Like, was there more sun? Like, maybe that's it. Because this one, it was super overcast the whole race. It was cooler. And maybe that's a big part of it. Also, the fact that it's a cutoff race, so there's more on the line, and people are trying to fight for more, even though there's fewer people in the playoffs at that point. But so I started thinking, like, what do they need to do to fix this again? Here we go. But I'm like, don't want to fall right into that trap of what I hate is just hearing about that. Especially, it's always short tracks at this point, short tracks and road courses now. Is it just we need to fix something? We need to change rules. We need to do this, and I'm like, let's just go a year without having to do that.
They need to. Well, that's the good thing about it. It's NASCAR says, well, at least you're talking about it, right? There's no publicity. Bad publicity is not necessarily, at least somebody's talking about it. But maybe they just need Goodyear to sneak those tires in like they did at Bristol last year in the spring. The ones that were supposedly the same, because that's the type of fall off everybody's talking about. That's the type of thing, you don't want them shredding to the point where they're blowing out. But on the other hand, 40 laps in, it was about a second to a second half fall off, and everybody was on the same lap time. And it's the same thing we say about practice and no practice. And okay, the more practice you get, the more dialed in the car is going to get at the start of the race. So at
Yeah.
least usually the first stage of the race, you're seeing guys start to get the car dialed in, right? Because they only got 25 minutes of practice. And then as this race went on, everybody had it dialed in. And I say everybody was on the lead lap. I'm looking 20 positions down, and everybody was within a tenth every lap. 0.2, 0.1, 0.2, 0.1. And as it progressed and the tires wore a little bit at 0.3, 0.4, 0.4, 0.5. And it was just everybody was in the same thing, just like a train going around the track. I mean, in person, the action's always better because you can see all the action and you can see everything. TV is not as good at that, obviously, and Fox is definitely not as good at that because they like to zoom in on 3 cars, and there's really no drama when you do that. But yeah, it especially like I said, the end of a race where you should have something going on. You hope all these rules over the years have all been built toward keeping more guys on the lead lap and giving more guys a chance to win, and it just is not doing it. Thankfully, the next week should be better. It's a different track.
Yeah, hopefully. So let's start with our weekly race recap here. And parts of practice I thought were really promising. He
Yeah.
didn't show a ton of single lap speed, but it seemed like they brought a very similar car here that ends up with really great long run speed. And then the frustration builds a little bit when it comes to the actual qualifying laps. But go through what happened in practice, and then we can get to qualifying and then the race.
Yeah. So, he's in the first session. Now, this is what I was going to say earlier, and this has a lot to do with what happens with qualifying, too. The matrix is built on where you are in the standings plus where you finished the week before. And then there's 1 or 2 other little things that are minor adjustments. But the main thing is the main 2 things they look at is where you finished the week before and where you are in the point standings. And with what's happened, he ends up in the first session, which also means he went out 9th for qualifying this week. It was 10th the previous week. And, he ran all 60, he ran 67 laps. He didn't come off the track, which is great. Usually that means the car is pretty much where they want it if they don't have to make any major adjustments. And, between both sessions, the single lap was 0.194 back of the 23 car. Once again, everybody's like so worried about single lap speeds, and it's ridiculous anymore. And NASCAR's giving you more data on their on the phone and so forth now, where you can look at the 20 lap average and look at the 30 lap average. And that's where you really want to look, because 1 lap is not how, when they go out on the track. And if you guys have been there live, especially Martinsville, it takes 2 laps to get up to speed. Do you have a proper gap where you're at to the guy behind you and in front of you? So you don't always nail that lap within 3 or 4 laps, everybody getting on the track and the rubber getting laid down. So, people were like worried about, oh, well, it was 25th quickest. And it's like, well, yeah, but really, once again. So, in session 2, the 7 car's hood flips up onto his windshield, which puts a caution in the middle of the session. So this kind of keeps some of the cars from running full runs also. And what's interesting about that is only 23 cars do this at least 30 laps during each session. But of those 23 cars, Ryan is P1 in a 30 lap run. So once again, you're thinking, okay, this is it. And you're going to run more than 30 laps in a row at Martinsville, and so where they start shouldn't be too bad. Should be able to move up. Now, here's the problem going out 9th. And this was actually explained on Stacking Pennies. Not on the regular episode, but the one they do later in the week where they preview the next week's race. They call it Spare Change or something like that. And what Corey was saying on that is the first 10 to 12 cars that go out in qualifying at Martinsville pick up all the rubber. They go out there and they're basically the cleaning agent for everybody later on. And what happens, Ryan goes out and he says, he describes it as sliding all around. and that's why he's picking up the rubber. He doesn't have the grip that guys are going to have later on, and his qualifying time ends up being 30 seconds. So that's why this week's finish and this week's points, where he is in the standings, are going to help him a ton, because next week he'll go out later on in qualifying, and this stuff will be taken care of by the time he gets to the racing groove. The 20 gets the pole, and like I said, Ryan ends up 32nd to start the race here. So we go ahead and get to Sunday. We get stages of 80, 180, 400. Unlike the fall being a 500 lap race, the spring's 400, and fuel run of 175 to 190, which you almost never see in Martinsville most of the time. Although there was some green flag pitting that happened later in the race and messed a couple guys' days up. Pit stall 12, which is on the straightaway on the front stretch, behind the 42, in front of the 3. And once again, from the spare change thing, Skip was very excited. He wants to be on the front stretch. He hates pitting in the corners. He says it's too hard to come into the box for the driver and for them to know where to jump out and be where they want to be, and the launch angle and everything. So he says you lose. He believes that you lose time just being pitted on a corner. So the team's pretty happy about this. Even though you're picking 32nd for your selection. By lap 2 here, we're up to 30th on the outside. Lap 5, battling on the outside, up to P32 now. Lap 8 finally gets to the low lane. This is the bad thing about all the restarts in Martinsville, is you're trying hard, if you're in the higher lane, to get to the lower lane or to get clear of the guy behind you so that you can run what you want to run going into the turn. Lap 20 here, the 20's leader still. Ryan is about 12 seconds back of the leader. Once again, you're being that far back and you're in a line. Lap 26, we pass the 7 to get to 30th. And then at lap 32, the caution comes up for debris. This was a conspiracy theory. I didn't see, well, we have TV on. I didn't see it. I know some people online are like, oh, they threw a caution to help some people, which I
was going to say, in our Discord chat, someone brought up a post from what I like to call one of the prolific NASCAR Twitter trolls.
Yeah.
There's a handful of them out there, but this guy is probably the biggest one. I'm not going to even say his name because it's worthless. The account's worthless. Nobody follows him. He really just comments on everything he possibly can with a negative take on every single thing ever. And his post immediately after that was, Blaney was about to get lapped, so NASCAR threw a caution just to make sure there was no chance that he was going to get lapped. So I will say, admittedly, it was good. I think I even at the time during that race, I sent you a GIF about being nervous, because it's a legitimate possibility if this goes long enough and how long it took him. What concerned me was how long it took him to pass the 7. It took a very long time to get around him, and that's basically the only real pass he made. So I was like, oh man, he really is actually in danger of going down a lap here, which was totally shocking to me. Because when they've gotten behind it at this track before, whether there's a pit stop issue or strategy changes or something, he could just drive through the field without any problems. And I think he expected to be able to do that as well. So throughout this race, you'll hear the frustration from Ryan too. It's almost like he just doesn't understand, what's happening. So yes, whatever the debris was, hopefully if it was someone threw their sack of hot dogs on the track and that's what it was, or whatever, I don't care. Thank you, racing gods, for making that caution happen, because this caution completely changes the race for them.
Well, this is where this is perfect. This is where Jonathan gets to do his thing, because they stay out. Ryan's saying he's having problems with turn on the bottom, can't roll the curb the way he likes to. But they're staying out, and they go all the way up to P5, and only 6 cars stay out, including the 21 car at this point.
And my message to you was, I said, like, even if they lead or drop 15 spots here, huge net gain anyway. So I was like, even if they just start passing them left and right, as soon as the tires equalize, if he slides into 15th to 20th, I'm like, hey, great call. Mm-hmm. So that was my the low end of my expectations for the strategy call. But I thought either way, with as hard as it was to pass back there, you got to try something.
I was really truthfully hoping to hang on to the top 10 somehow, really, because you're talking about a restart with Let's see here. It was lap 40. So they had only 40 to go in the stage. So the leader's 21 on the bottom. Ryan takes the top, and he's in row 2. So he took an extra row because it was there for the taking. And this is again one of those things where you think, if he can get over, but he gets clear of the 6 to P4. So it does actually work out for him on this restart. And then he gets in the low lane behind the 2. Lap 52, the 22 is on passing on the inside here. And so Ryan's P5 at lap 55, battling the 9 and the 48 coming up from behind him now. And at lap 58, both the 48 and 9 pass. Now we're back to 7th. At lap 60, the 5 passes back to 8th. And then at lap 65, battling the 11, and we're back to 9th at this point. And lap 66, the 23 and the 45 end up passing together. So back to 11th here. At lap 68, the 3 passes back to 12th. And then at lap 72, they get the caution for the 77, spinning out the 17. Ryan says he's plowing in the center. They're up to P12 here, and they do pit for 4 tires here. And everybody kind of, 7 cars stay out. So this is interesting because he comes in 12th. He comes out 19th based on the 7 cars staying out. So they held serve here. I had it down at like a little over 11.38. So P17 actually ends up being for the choose because 1 or 2 cars actually end up coming in at this point. 22 takes the bottom from the lead there. Ryan takes the bottom. Restart lap 78. 22 wins the stage. Ryan is in 18th there at the end of the stage here. So this is when the 21 and the 2 start to have their battery issues. And we don't know what or why, but we do hear on the radio to do some certain things here, including not using any type of fans. We're going to leave the alternator on all the way to the end of the race, which we don't always do. So let's see here. We're going back out here. The 48 and the 42 who have stayed at have 30 lap old tires, and they're leading up there at the front. Ryan's up to 12th here, as some of the cars who stayed out now pit, except for those 2. The 48 chooses the bottom here, and Ryan chooses the top, goes all the way up to row 6 here. The 42 is also on the bottom, so you think the outside lane should move a little better on this restart. Ryan, like I said, is told not to use certain fans. Restarting lap 93 here. By lap 96, we're battling the 71. At lap 102, P13. And then at lap 103, passing the 1. Or I'm sorry, the 1 passes us. Up to 14th here now. Lap 104, passing the 42 to 13th. The 9 is now the leader at this point. At lap 122, we get a caution for the 50. Jonathan asks about turn and drive again, and Ryan just says, yep. So, we're pitting for 4 tires here. In 13th, out 16th, but 5 different cars stay out. So this is actually a net gain on pit road of a couple. 10.52 stop, according to what I figured out. Jonathan's turn off any fans you don't need under the cautions at all times. The 5, the 19, 22 are on 2 tires. The 11, 23, 54, 41, and 99 stayed out. So he did a net gain of positions on pit road, even though 1 or 2 guys actually took 2 tires. So 15th actually for the choose here. The 11 takes the top. Ryan takes the bottom in row 8. Restart lap 131 here. Lap 135 up to P12 here. And they're all still 2x2. Lap 138, passing the 22 up to 11th. Lap 142 passes the 24 up to 10th. At lap 147 passes the 5 up to 9th. The 11 still leads. At lap 150 passes the 99 up to 8th. Tim says it tells him he's the fastest car on the track at this point.
I thought this was like I was like,
Yeah.
This is all right. This is the car we know. This is the Ryan we know at Martinsville. We're golden the rest of the way. I talked about my expectations just being a top 10. Now I'm like, they got a car that can win. They just got to go up there and battle the 9 and everybody else that was running well in this race. So, but truthfully, I don't know. We'll keep going with the recap, but this was the best run of the day. Run right.
Yeah. Lap 160, we're chasing the 20. At lap 165, passing the 20 up to P7 here. At lap 175, we're trying to pass the one on the outside. This was really interesting to watch. The one car was having trouble coming off the corners. And what this did, not only could Ryan get to his outside, but he could pin him and make him run a line he didn't want to run off the corner. And really he just powered around him all the way up to 6 now. Lap 180, the 11 wins the stage, but we get P6, which stage points at the end of stage 2 in the top 10, passing some cars. I'm thinking the same thing you are. It's like everything is moving forward now. We're at least getting to show off how good the car is. This is a little bit better. Some of the same issues. He tried passing the 19 on the outside last lap or two, so he almost got to 5th. And he says he doesn't understand why it's 30 degrees hotter in here, which, they're not running all their fans and stuff. So they ask him if he wants an ice bag, actually. So they come in for 4 tires, and the 42 should be coming in as we're leaving. Now, this is interesting, like about pitting, about the teams and cooperation, because I think what ends up happening is they enter enter P6, they leave P6, and the 42 helped us. I have a note here because Jonathan talked to their crew chief or somebody between the two, and also Tim on the roof. And we don't see it. We don't see it on TV. You can't see it on the in-car camera because the in-car camera's out the front window, but the 42 held up basically coming into his stall. He let the 12 launch before he pitted. Of course, he was like second to the last car in the lead lap to begin with, so he really wasn't going to lose any positions. So it was a really, really nice thing to do. It was 10.68 stop here. The 11 leads the bottom lane here. Ryan's on the bottom of row 4, so he loses a row just to be in the bottom lane here with 20 in front of him. Restarting at lap 194 here, sorts to P6. At lap 190, clears the 19 to get to 5th. And then at lap 200, we get caution for the 35 in turn 1. The 2 helped him. This was brought up, and I don't know if we want to talk about this for a second, but to me, this looks like strike 2.
Yeah, I think he's really lucky it wasn't a right hook. I mean, they're really focused on the right hooks because how those crashes happen and how they go into a wall and this kind of thing. But regardless, the 2 was the meat in the sandwich, bounces off the car on the bottom, and then I think because he got squeezed by the 35, and very clearly to me steers right into the 35 and manages to spin him out with that kind of a move without wrecking himself. So kudos to the 2 for that. But I think he's having a frustrating day overall because of the battery issues that TV talked about them briefly, but apparently they were like swapping the 2's battery out all race long up until they had no more to swap out, and he goes behind the wall later in the race. So, but I mean, he got a huge points and monetary fine earlier in the season for, was that at Coda? In the 3 car or the 10 car. So, and they didn't suspend him for that. So if you're talking about strikes, this might be a strike 2 that they might not do anything about. But if he does one more thing, they might have to
keep a good eye on him. So staying out here, the 11 chooses the bottom, Ryan on the top in row 2. So now he takes the top because there's to advance a row, figuring this might help. Restart lap 207 here, battling the 20 in P5 at lap 230. P5 about 3.3 seconds back of the 11 in first. At lap 245 here, all the teams in the top 10 are within within a tenth in their lap times. And he's starting to cut into the lap traffic here. Lap 250, 4 seconds back of the leader, the 11. Lap 259, the 42 and the 66 get in the way here. And the 5 starts to come from behind because of it. The 42 ends up between us and the 20, for a little bit here. And then at lap 267, some cars start to pit under green flag, which, and then at lap 270 here, Ryan is talking about more rear grip, figuring when he goes to pit, they'll be able to make their adjustments. But at lap 275, at lap 275, actually the 7 car comes by because he's on fresh tires, trying to get a lap back, and then we get a caution for the 88 and 3 and 4, where he lost his tire. So he come off pit road and lost his right rear. So some people are going to get a week or two off over there in the 88 camp.
Now, when we talk about the point standings later and how, despite not getting any stage points in the beginning, Ryan gains a little ground in the standings, it's because of this moment, because William Byron is one of those teams that pits early here, I believe, in an effort to split this final stage in thirds, which is a strategy at Martinsville.
Yeah.
I think it's because they didn't have that great of a car, which is surprising because I believe he's won there before.
In the spring.
In the spring. So I think they were just throwing a Hail Mary. I mean, they can do it. They have, they have a win in the bank, and you're playing with house money at this point. So they attempt this, but it really hurts them because of the way this caution comes out immediately. And I think they take a wave around here eventually, but it just buries them in the back. And as we've already talked about, it's hard to pass when you're in the back. At least it was in this race in the spring.
Yeah, so now this time we're going to pit for 4 tires of fuel, but the 42 is actually a lap down, so he's going to pit second time around. So we don't even have to worry about him coming around us. And I've got written down here, I think it's about 11.0 stop in 5th, out 7th. So they lost position 2, and I've got long pull on the left front is what I've written down here. And like I said, sometimes this is like it's only like a brief second or two, so it's not like real bad. You can just see it with the in-car camera that it looked like a hitched for a second, and that second, like I said, it's 2 spots, and maybe Skip will bring it up on stacking pennies. But one thing Ryan says after he comes off onto the track is he asks about adjusting the marks on his steering wheel. And the reason being is because he has to turn the wheel right and left when they go to change the front tires to help get it out. And Jonathan, what did he say? Jonathan more or less said, yeah, it would help, but it probably wasn't the problem this time around. So, but it's just one of those tiny little things that you don't know, don't see, don't hear about till, hopefully here, hopefully you came here and you found out from us. But so for this restart, 11 taking the bottom, Ryan taking the top in row 3, with the 9 inside of us, the 19 behind. The 22 is behind the 9 on the inside. That's going to be kind of fun. Restart lap 283 here. By lap 290, we're still 7th or 8th here, with the 1 and the 5 battling in front of us. Lap 292, we finally get behind the 22 in 9th. So when I say finally get behind the 22, we finally get down to the lower lane, can run. We're clear of the guy behind us in a way where we can run the lap the way we want to run it. At lap 296 here, we're now chasing the 5 car. At lap 298, caution for the 54, and we're going to stay out. So the 11 takes the bottom for this restart. Ryan on the bottom here, row 6 inside behind the 6. Restart lap 306, sorts out to 10th. At lap 309, we get a caution. We're in 9th here. The 4 and the 17 were involved in this one. Tim says 5:12 per NASCAR, so we're up to 10th. There was a thing where they gave him position for the guy, and I don't know how he got that position. But
This was a rough sequence too, because the 5 really was struggling. He had a top 10 car, but I think he wanted more out of his car. I think he expects more out of his car as well, much like Ryan did, I think, in this race specifically. And there's a couple times in this race where the 5 is just making crazy moves, like bonsai, I would say, kind of moves down to the bottom to force his way down to the bottom lane. He tried to do it on Ryan, and I don't know if it's this point or not, but Ryan gets tired of it and punts him, and it might be after this next restart. But even in this one, they made some contact because the 5 just kept throwing these blocks, and Ryan did kind of move him out of the way. And before this caution happens, and I think they were side by side going into the turn, and I didn't see the 5 on the outside. So I think it's a scoring loop thing or something, to where I think when the caution came out, the 12 was ahead. but they go back to a scoring loop that maybe the 5 was ahead. But I think I remember messaging you like how is this even possible? I was frustrated because how hard it was to get the 5 out of the way in the first place because he was holding them up. So like I keep talking about frustration. There's lots of frustration during this race again because I think we expected more out of the car. Ryan expected more out of the car. They just came off of a pit stop a couple sequences ago where he lost some ground on pit road, and he comes over the radio and he doesn't like call out the crew or anything, but he basically is just saying like I don't know what else to say, but we just can't lose spots on pit road. And to bring that up, I listened to if you listen to Skip anytime when he talks about the pit stops throughout this year on Stacking Pennies, but then also today, this is Actions Detrimental podcast with Hamlin. They had like Bozy Tadevich as his special guest, and he is a pit crew member in IMSA for Vassar Sullivan, but he also follows a lot of NASCAR stuff too, and is always like kind of tweeting out explanations and things on stuff. So they had a great conversation about the evolution of pit stops and where I think the 12 team this year has been doing a really good job of holding serve, but often maybe losing one spot or so. And the reason this is happening is this new, and I really want to get our 12 guys on here to explain this, our Jackman, because there's a new jack technique this year that JGR and 2311 are using, and they are destroying everybody on pit road right now. Because they are in the 8-second bracket now. And if you remember last year, it was a big deal when the 12 team kind of consistently got in the really low 10s and would get into the 9s. Yeah. Now the JGR and especially 2311 figured something out over the offseason that they are consistently in the 9s and now dipping into the 8s. So it's like it's evolution of the pit stop. And I know the Penske crews are they're in their pit department are going to work on this super hard, and they're going to catch up, and they always have. But I think that's where, if you're seeing us lose spots here and there now, it's because of this evolution. It works the same as the cars do. If Jonathan has brought super fast cars to the track and other teams are catching up, other teams are finding other ways to improve things, and one of these things is on pit road, and we might not seem to always see that first. I think Penske's approach is more consistency based and a little bit more conservative. And some of these other teams I think are more willing to try things. And you saw that with Gibbs in the past. They tried that whole new choreography that they've since abandoned, but they do try to innovate like that. So, but yeah, if you've seen the 23 has had one of the best crews on pit road. So you saw the 23. I think jump us a couple times in this race, and the 20 as well when he was running up there too. So just a quick thing, but if you listen to Action Detrimental, or if you listen to Skip on Stacking Pennies, they have discussed this new technique. It's not really something I'm qualified to talk about, but it did come into play in a short track race at Martinsville where frustrations are high about track position. I just want to kind of give that explanation as to what's going on and how suddenly these teams are advancing, and they had a good talk on Denny's show about where they think the threshold might be for how fast they can, physically or whatever, like scientifically actually get before they hit the floor or hit the ceiling. I guess the floor or the ceiling, but we'll see. But either way, I think our crew, they had a couple hiccups with the wheels coming off in a couple races this year, but beyond that, they're pretty solid. But everyone has to advance. When we got it, like I said, when we got excited about them getting, low 10s and into the 9s, like now the too bad that's standard now, guys.
So for the next restart here, the 11 takes the bottom. Ryan picks from P10, takes the top in row 5. Restart lap 315 here. The 60 passes on the inside. So we're in the 11th position. The 22 gets spun out here. So this is where he gets, and Ryan's up to 10th here. The 19, what happened? The 19 bounced off the curb, and that's what caused that whole thing here. So the 11 is the leader, taking the bottom for this one. Ryan takes the bottom, row 6. It's restart lap 235 here, sorting out the P11. We're pushing the 71 here with the 34 outside of us. At lap 330, we're stuck behind the 71 and the 34 in 11th. Lap 336, we pass the 71, get to 10th. Lap 365 here, we're about 4.8 back of first place, 11th. And, like I said, lap 370 here. I'm sorry, we're 270s, right? Yeah, 370. 7 seconds back of the 11 now. Same lap times as everyone in front of us. Lap 380 here, getting closer to the 34 here, P9. Now the 11, the 22 does pass us at this point here, and we go back to P11. So and then that's pretty much where it ends. That's like I said, he was the only one moving because his tires were 42 laps fresher. We finished 11th. 10th would have been super. But Hamlin wins the race. Like you said, a couple of Toyota teams up in the front. A couple guys played out their strategy just right to get in the top 10 in front of Ryan. But overall, going forward, it's just, like I said, this is a great thing because what ends up happening now is this week's practice and qualifying should be in the second group, should go way later for qualifying, not maybe 30th instead of 9th. So they'll be able to find a spot on the track where the rubber's been picked up. Darlington is just as sensitive to this as any of the other tracks, and hopefully be able to run the line we want to run when we go to qualify and be up in the top 10 to start the race. And the best thing about this week too is that we got all kind of fun stuff. But let's go and we'll talk about that in a minute. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean the fact that last run, again, things that are frustrating, he did have to take a long time. The 71 made his car extremely wide. At the end of this race, he had a slower car, and just kept taking the lines away. Ryan's peppering his bumper, and he was doing that to a lot of cars throughout the race without a ton of success. Part of it, I think he just didn't want to mess his stuff up too bad. But he did eventually get past him, and then you could just see at that point, and they were on a pretty long run with their tires at this point. So he just didn't have any drive off the rest of the race. He could getting deeper into the corner, he could get to the 34, which is Gilliland now, and but just couldn't get to his inside. You could see him trying early in that great run that he had early in the race where he passed a bunch of cars. He could dime in the corner, get underneath the guy, and drive up and off. But he just didn't have that coming off the corner. So it was a little frustrating. I mean, if you look at just the scorecard and you see, something weird happened in qualifying, starts 32nd, and then you see, stage points in stage 2, great stage points, and 11th place finish. You'd say that's an okay day. Did they leave anything on the track? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's just, like we said, the spring race hasn't been as good for them as the fall race, but he's still been pretty dang good in the spring races. So to me, he didn't necessarily meet expectations for the day, but based on where he started, really great, solid turnaround, and hopefully just the start of getting things turned around. Like you said, there's a domino effect to everything. And if they can just get, a better spot, a better group in practice, a better spot to go out in qualifying, better pit stall selections because of, qualifying a little bit better, they'll have an opportunity here as they head to Darlington next week. But before we get to Darlington, let's talk about the NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Ryan has slipped down the board after those 3 straight DNFs. I think last week he was in the minus 70 or so range in points, but because of William Byron's bad day, he gains points. He doesn't gain any positions. He stays in 10th in the standings. But he is 10th now, minus 66 points. Teammate Joey Logano is now the highest Ford in the standings. He's jumped up over the 12 into 9th at minus 60. Bubba Wallace is in 8th. Reddick 7th. Hamlin 6th. Bowman 5th. Bell 4th. Elliott 3rd. Larson 2nd. And William Byron still leads the points, but not by a narrowing margins, just 16 ahead of Larson there. And Bell, with the most wins on the season, is still back and forth, 35 points out of the lead. So points wise, being 66 back, I mean, that's something. 2 really good races in a row. He can vault back up into the top 5 at any moment. They were so lucky in those 3 DNF races that they did get decent stage points along the way, or they'd be in really bad shape. Where like a guy like Brad Keselowski right now that is just absolutely buried in 30th.
Yeah.
Ty Gibbs, who's had great runs at points during these races, but just can't finish a race off. There's some guys back there that are really struggling that got buried early on in the season. So the 12 has luckily been able to get those stage points.
Can you imagine where Austin? Can you imagine where Austin?
Yeah, I actually believe going into the weekend, Cindric was actually ahead of the 12 in owners points because the points fine that they got was driver only. They didn't fine the owner for some reason. He would have been he could have been ahead. So that's an interesting thing. But yeah, Cindric has had, much like the 12, has run really great races and just hasn't gotten all the finishes they deserve. So that's where we are in the NASCAR Cup Series point standings again. So P11 at Martinsville. Definitely have much higher hopes for Martinsville in the fall. But hopefully by the time they get there, he's already locked into the championship 4 with multiple wins in the bag and lots of playoff points and a real solid run through the playoffs by the time they get there back to the paper clip there in Virginia. So one last thing to clean up over the weekend at Martinsville is the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. And I talked about my frustrations for the week, and my frustrations with the race and how things were playing out kind of resulted in me just, forgetting about fantasy. And quite honestly, I was maybe 20 laps away from forgetting to check in for fan rewards, which would have been devastating for me if I would have forgotten that. So that's kind of where my mindset was. I just stayed out of that app. So I did set my starters after practice on Saturday. This was my starting lineup. I had Ryan Blaney in, got me 31 points. Bowman got me 19. Bowman was strong at points in the race, but they had a loose wheel they had to come back in for and kind of derailed their day. Hamlin, the winner, got me 54. This is my mistake. I had Josh Berry in the starting lineup, which looked fantastic. He led the race at the beginning up until the electrical issues struck them. But I left him in the lineup. I never switched him out. I have Bell in the lineup, 38 points. And then Larson, while not having an amazing day or anything, did have 35 points. So I left 30. There's a 30-point swing there if I would have remembered to go in and switch Larson, which probably would have resulted in me, for sure, 30. I would have been in the top 10 for sure. So that's unfortunate. Featured matchups, I picked Larson over Byron. That was right. I picked Blaney over Elliott. That was wrong. I picked Wallace over Bowman. That was right. And I picked Briscoe over Chastain, and that was wrong. So I got 2 out of the 4 featured matchups. 116 or 167 points, on the weekend. And that's kind of where I was. I know you weren't sure if you could pull your lineup or not, but do you have who your starting lineup was for this?
Yeah, I wrote down the guys and the totals, so we have it. What I got is the Bell with 38 points. I had Larson with 35, Hamlin with 54, Elliott with 46. Logano with 39, and then I ended up with I had Byron, which was wrong. I had Elliott, which was right. I had Wallace, which was right, and I had Briscoe, which was wrong. So I lost 20 points there. I could have had, but otherwise I had my lineup was what my 5 guys were in the top 7 of scoring on the day for points. So yeah, I had a pretty decent day.
Yeah, you did great. You ended up 232 points overall, and in the top 10. So let's roll through this top 10 here in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League, which starts with a crazy 6-way tie for 10th this week with Rochi 12, Brock H, Stellanarius, Glitterbugs, Chelsea Megan, and Pit Stop Pro with 231 points earned. Then we have a tie for 8th between your team, Mez 12, and Go 12 Go at 232. So tight, this top 10. 7th is Christian Dana, 234. 6th is Fike 21, 235. Tie for 4th with Dr. Race Chaser and Vans 12, 238. One more point here to a tie for 2nd with Blaney 10 and Clyde's Chicken Pit Racing, 239. But the leader had some separation here. No hesitation. 248 points earned on the weekend to win the weekend at Martinsville Speedway in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. Let's take a look at the overall standings in the league. I'm holding down the 52nd position overall, 1,188 points. You are in the 24th position, Mez 12, 1,288 points. So I've got a ways to go to catch back up to you. Let's take a look at the top 10. In 10th, Dr. Race Chaser, 1,317 points. In 9th is Moose Hunter, 1960, 1,329. In 8th is Fike 21, 1,335. 7th, Pit Stop Pro, 1,336. In 6th is Jordan Daniels, 1,338. 5th is Bulldog, 0277, 1,340. Blaney's Daisy is in the 4th position, 1,347. Alyssa C is in 3rd with 1,384 points. Go 12 Go in 2nd, 1,394. And leading the way with an even 1,400 points is Vans 12, first in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League, following the race at Martinsville Speedway. And that brings us now to the weekend, throwback weekend at Darlington Raceway, where things kick off on Saturday, April 5th. With practice and qualifying. Practice is at 12:35 p.m. Eastern time on Prime. Something I had to remember. I went to go turn practice on Saturday, and first I went to my YouTube TV to try and find it on Fox, and then I was like, oh wait, no, it's not on Fox. It's on this other thing. And I was like, oh wait, no, it's on Prime. So I eventually got there, just a few minutes behind. So if you haven't figured it out already, practice and qualifying are on Prime for most races at the beginning of the year. 12:35 p.m. Eastern time at Darlington. 1:40 p.m. Eastern time is qualifying. And then the NASCAR Xfinity Series Sport Clips Haircuts VFW Help a Hero 200 from Darlington is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on the CW network. It seems to me like things have gotten a little bit better when it comes to CW streaming. I think some of those college contracts and soccer things that some of those stations had have expired, so they're getting back to more of the racing, but I have still seen some people having audio issues. Like they can see the broadcast, but there's no audio. Anywho, hopefully they get all that figured out, at least halfway through the season or something. Let's take a look at the next day, Sunday, April 6th. You have the Goodyear 400, 3 p.m. Eastern time on FS1, and you can watch the in-car cameras on Max. As I think you found out this week, and a lot of folks probably did.
Yeah.
Max, after launching all of this, did change that you needed to be in a higher tier, at the ad-free tier, basically, for Max in order to continue on watching the NASCAR in-car cameras. And I know that's like our little niche of this whole thing. It's our little world, but part of it was just they're trying to have more value out of their sports package that people had. So instead of just charging more for it, they essentially just dropped it from the basic plan and added it to the premium plan. So if anyone was confused as to why they couldn't see in-car cameras this past week or something, it's because you have to upgrade your Max plan, which is unfortunate, but I would say, you would probably say, extremely worth it.
Oh, well, here's the thing. When I did it, I did the bundle anyway, which was I did a bundle with Hulu and Disney.
That's what we got. Yeah.
We've found Hulu. We've found a couple different shows that were just like, I'm watching these Canadian shows, Letterkenny and so forth.
Letterkenny.
I would have never thought I would have watched, but
I said Letterkenny's great.
Oh, Letterkenny's, yeah, and then Shoresy. But then only Murders in the Building, right? With that all 4 seasons. Now we're on to whatever's Creek with Eugene.
Oh, yep.
Levy.
Another great show. Yeah.
So all these great shows, and now with this level, no commercials. We're just blowing through them now, just binge watch, and then find another one. So that's just Hulu. And then Disney, it's amazing all the stuff on Disney. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's all there. If you're an Avengers fan, it's all there. So it's just like, yeah, it's worth it in the long run. I kind of knew that they were supposed to change it. I had read something early on that was going to happen, so I knew it was coming. I just didn't remember what weekend. And then I got an email like about a week ago, and actually Jerry and I, Mariotti, were talking about texting back and forth, and he looked it up and he goes, "Yeah, I got the same email." And he just didn't see it either. And then so we just hurried up and did that before the race. But once again, if you're watching the in-car camera and you're into it to begin with, I mean, it's so much fun. And this weekend will be even more fun because it's a little bit wider track and a little more going on, and hopefully some more passing.
Yeah. So again, the Cup Series is headed to the historic Darlington Raceway for the annual NASCAR Throwback Weekend. Ryan Stats at Darlington. It's been a tough track for him over the years. Has some flashes of brilliance, but he's still lacking a top 5 at this track. He did have a stretch there in 2023 in the next gen car where he had back-to-back 9th place finishes. And then 2024, both times running in the top 5, and was crashed out of the race. One of them, the Southern 500, only made it a couple laps. So it was
good news, though. Good news this year, Martin Truex is no longer.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Truex was involved in both of those incidents. So, hopefully Ryan will be a little bit safer. So his last 5 finishes there: 13th, 9th, 9th, 36th, 37th. He has an average start of 10.2, average finish of 19.6, which is rough. 2 DNFs, which are the last 2 races there at Darlington, both of those in 2024. 3 top 10. So those top 10s again were both in 2023. And then another one all the way back in 2021. So prior to that, he hung around in this like 13th to 16th area as far as stats go. So not necessarily his best track statistically, but I do think in the last 4 or 5 years with the next gen car, they have really come into their own and finding some speed at Darlington. So I don't think it's one of those weekends to go into with low expectations. I think they're going to have speed again. They're going to be in that better group for practice and qualifying, and hopefully can turn things around, as I've already said about 15 times. So the other highlight of the weekend, if you're watching our video version here, Steve's holding up some show and tell items. And why don't you talk about why you're choosing that hood, Steve, with the beautiful, beautiful green color.
Yes.
Beautiful, wonderful green color on that hood that you're showing us.
Oh, here we go. Can we fight? Can we fight? Okay. I want you to tell me, because you are the aficionado of diecast here more than I am, and these paint schemes. How many times in the past couple of years have they not had a throwback scheme?
I think there's been a couple. I mean, if I'm thinking back, Ryan's last few of them, they did the Dave Jasper car. They did Menard's Paul Menard, I think, or not Paul Menard, or is it? Oh, maybe it was like an older Menard scheme throwback one of the years. They did another Dave throwback to, I think, his World of Outlaws championship year. But there's at least 2 years, I think, in there where they just showed up with a straight up body armor car, or they showed up with a regular Menard. Last year, people joked that they were throwing it back to the championship car because they just brought the regular Dutch boy Menard's paint scheme. So yeah.
So that's how I'm looking at this at first. Okay, they made an attempt. Okay, now the purist like yourself gonna be like, well, it's not the green. It's not the green. I understand it's not the green, but the scheme itself has all the elements. The colors are in close to the places where they were back in 2006. The numbering, they were able to use the font that was on that Braun racing car in 2006. And to me, the spirit is there. And it's in there in a way where when you look at it, like, I don't know, I want to bring up that picture where the diagram that they did where the 2 cars are next to each other. I mean, that sure, the one's green and the one's blue, but when you look at it, you're looking at two cars that look almost exactly the same, and because of the just one's green and one's blue in those
Yeah.
areas. So to me, they did a fabulous job, and to throw it back to this car, and this is part of why why I pulled the hood down. And I told this story on Saturday, but I'll do it here because this will be on our podcast version too. And that's a couple years ago when we got invited to the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation event at the Top Golf. I made these hoods, and I gave them out to everybody in the family and the foundation, Patty, Ryan's parents. Ryan's
These are the
sisters,
hoods that you put up on your wall,
Yeah.
up the wall behind you. You made a special custom foundation.
I made a special one, like that is a Ryan Blaney Family Foundation and Alzheimer's, UPMC, sports medicine on it. All the things that they're working with, and their logo across it with a purple hood. For those who are just gonna be listening, and when he came to our booth, because he did every booth, he went down the line, took pictures of everybody. When he came to our booth, I presented it, and then I had to tell him or show him the wall that I have. And some of you have seen it, and if you're watching the version of this, you can see that I've got 35, 40 of them that I've done, put them on a wall, and in the right-hand side is about 8 or 10 that are Dave, that are his dad's. So I'm showing him on my cell phone the picture of the wall, and he's looking at it real quick and just kind of glancing, and the first thing he points out is all the way on the right hand side in the corner, the Haas avocado one that I made. And he said that, he says, "Is that Haas avocado over there?" I says, "Yes, it is." And for him to pick that out of that picture, when he's got all these colors and these designs and all the hoods that he recognizes, but he picked that out of the picture, the Haas avocado one. And that was really, really impressive. And that's probably that memory more than anything else, because how many times did Dave actually run that paint scheme? It was in the Xfinity car, Braun Racing. Braun Racing went through some different changes with different sponsors that they had over times. Was Fan First part of the Braun Racing?
Yeah, I think you had the Fan First. You had that U-Pack car, a few different. There's a point when it went to Toyota.
Yeah, Behringer Wine.
That specific car here is a Chevrolet. So.
Yeah. So he had that paint scheme on that car just a couple times, probably over the years. But that night, October 13th, it was a Friday night. He wins that race, and that memory is with the family and with Ryan to the point where they did this throwback scheme. So it's not just, okay, we're throwing it back to something his dad drove, but we're throwing back to something his dad drove on probably his best night as a NASCAR driver, at least. I mean, he's had huge victories in the sprint car world and done so many huge things in the sprint car world that even guys like Kyle Larson haven't done yet, But as far as a NASCAR driver and his late to the NASCAR career like he was, to win a race, and then the lineup of the guys he beat that night, because I think you pointed that out before, So everything about this throwback scheme, to me, that's what I love more than anything about it, is that it was such a huge night following Dave in his career to begin with, and I don't care if it's not green or not.
Yeah, I mean, just I will say, like you said, I'm glad they tried something. They did it in the spirit of it. I was disappointed because it is such a huge memory for me. My wife a few years ago, through a friend of mine that made custom diecast, surprised me. I think for my birthday with a custom diecast of this 32 Haas avocados. NASCAR, then Busch Series winning car from Charlotte Motor Speedway that Dave drove to his only win in the NASCAR National Series level. So it's such like this cherished moment, this cherished, collectible that I have and memory and everything. So when when they announced that that's what it's going to be, and I kind of just see the text of, it's throwing back to Dave Blaney's 2006 Charlotte Busch Series win, I was pumped, and then I see the car and it's blue, and I'm like, oh. And again, if you do want to see the car,
Oh
if you take a
no.
look at our Team Blaney
Yeah,
NASCAR or our Team Blaney Facebook page, I do have the original car and the new car, the sides
mhm.
of side views of them side by side. You can look at that on our social media. But yeah, my heart sunk when I saw that they made it blue. My initial thought was
Oh,
like, "Come on, Dutch Boy is a paint company. They don't just sell blue paint. Why can't they make it green?" So it is what it is. Like you said, I'm trying to look on the brighter side of things. There are
think of how cool this is going to be when you get the die cast and put it next to the other die cast.
we shall see. I said that it's a possibility that I'll get a die cast of this car, but I said I will really buy one, and I won't care what color it is when it has confetti on top of it. So that's the hopes for sure. Is that Ryan?
Fair, fair
Because
enough.
honestly, overall in throwback weekends, I mean, part of this is just because he hasn't had a great track record at Bristol or at Darlington. Um, he's kind of been bitten in a lot of these throwback races. Hasn't had great finishes. So again, maybe this is an opportunity for him to kind of break that streak, especially after the two DNFs there the past couple races. So yeah, like I said, I'm disappointed, but I am, like you said, happy that they tried something. The coolest thing to me is the fact that unlike some of the other years, they didn't change the 12 font at all. But Penske across the
Mhm.
board in the 2, the 22, and the 12 has changed the fonts for the car numbers for their various things. Logano
Yeah.
is throwing back to a Cale Yarborough scheme, and I think Cindric is what he's throwing back to Dale Earnhardt. I think one of those early schemes as well. So, but they did change the number font, which really surprised me because again, I think it was just a Penske thing,
Yeah.
being conservative, being consistent. It's our branding; we don't want to change it. But this year they took another step with them. So, like I said,
The video today with Logano in the fire suit was really, really cool too. That fire suit was so, really hoping that they may or may not do it. Sometimes they've done fire suits for these guys with that match the throwback, but um, Dave's fire suit from that night was pretty cool too. That's where I got the design for the
yep.
T-shirt that I made. I'm gonna touch this up, make a little, add a couple things to it probably at some point. But
So back to the actual
yeah,
racing itself this weekend. Again, we mentioned Ryan has an
mhm,
average finish of 19th, a couple DNFs. Though prior to that, he had a couple top tens in a row where they started to find some speed. He started to find a way to get around that track.
mhm.
We recapped our fantasy league. I know you're going to be looking to practice and qualifying to tweak that lineup, but I wanted to see if there was anybody else aside from the 12 car that you think is going to show up with speed. So I'll go run through the top 10 in the Southern 500. This is Chase Briscoe getting the last win for Stewart-Haas Racing in the fall there. Kyle Busch was second. This is one of those races where Kyle had an opportunity to finally break that losing streak and just lost out to the 14 car. Bell was third. Larson, Chastain, Buescher, Hamlin, Logano, Corey LaJoy snuck in for a top 10, and then Reddick was 10th. So when you're thinking about
Mhm.
fantasy, or if you're thinking about drivers that they're going to have to race heads up this weekend, are you looking at past results, or are you looking at who's more the hot hand right now?
I'm looking at the guys who like being on the wall. The 5, you know, Reddick, the 45. Also, guys, the Bell's usually pretty good up there too. So guys who aren't afraid to get up there. The great thing about this one is, unlike Miami, being up against the wall in 3 and 4 is a lot more dangerous. Like at Miami, it seems like they could bump it a little bit and still have good momentum. Like Larson get away with a lot of times, like tail slapping that wall a little bit. Here, I don't think you get away with it as much. The wall kind of comes in at a certain point, and you got to be ready for it. And guys like Larson have made mistakes on that wall too. So that you can run up there, but how close can you get? What kind of momentum will you get? How many guys are going to try and slide job somebody coming low, going high, coming out of there? like I said, practice will tell you a lot just by watching at the different lines guys run. And I don't know how much they show that sometimes, but that's part of why I like to listen to the scanner in practice too, because Ryan will ask those questions of Tim about who ran what line, where were they at in 1 and 2, where were they at in 3 and 4, to see if there's more speed someplace else. So and the thing is about a guy like Ryan is he's not afraid to run any of the lines. So he's, to me, if qualifying goes well, he's a contender.
Now, I want to get your take on this as well. Now, Josh Berry got in a crash in this race in the fall, but I wanted to get your take on where he is at. Obviously, he's the first Penske-affiliated car to win a race this year, has had speed nearly everywhere they've gone. What do you think about the 21 car suddenly being a contender? And they've gone to lots of different types of tracks where he's run well. Do you think this is an opportunity for them to bounce back as well? And does it concern you at all? Like, because it's like I'm happy for Josh Berry, but I'm always also jealous all the time of how the teammates run. And Ryan has spent the last several years as often being the fastest Penske car every weekend. Logano has obviously had a lot of success too along the way. But what do you think about what Josh Berry is doing? He would have had a good run this past weekend if it wasn't for the electrical issues.
Yeah, I'm encouraged all the way because they are another Penske car. It's not necessarily it technically this or technically that, but they're another Penske car. It's prepared there. The engineering, the people, the pit crew, everything there is done there. And I'm encouraged by all that. To me, I've always thought that once Ryan left that car, I always thought that car should still run better than it does. And that the guys that are in it are running the same equipment as the 3 Penske guys. To me, it always was not good when it didn't run well. And the fact that it was part-time when Ryan jumped in it. And it only went full-time with Ryan, and then it stayed full-time. And for it to continue to stay full-time, or the Wood brothers to be committed to it that way, and the sponsors to be continued that way, you need to have a guy in it that's going to perform. So to me, I think it's been a great marriage of it. And, to me, it's the fourth Penske car, even though they won't call it that or whatever. It's great for the Wood brothers, to be able to maintain it and be in the sport. So, no, I'm always encouraged when it does well. And I'm really encouraged that Josh jumped in and did what he did with it, because he showed what kind of driver he is too. And he showed what kind of mess that he left. No offense to what it was Stuart Haas, but it was a mess. And the guys that have bailed out of there, you can see the difference now this year with what the equipment they're running in other places. So
yeah, especially Ryan Preece running extremely well. 3 straight top 10s. He's like the highlight of RFK racing right now. I know they've done it a lot with strategy, but hey, kudos. I've said before, with the way the 12's gotten some finishes, kudos to the crew chief and the team, because it's a team sport. So that doesn't bother me when strategy gets you some finishes, but they've shown a lot of speed. Yeah, those SHR graduates are doing pretty well right now as far as making a name for themselves elsewhere. So again, if you want to tune in the throwback weekend at Darlington Raceway for the NASCAR Cup Series, it kicks off at 12:35 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, with practice on Prime, followed at 1:40 p.m. Eastern Time, with qualifying also on Prime. And then Sunday, you can tune into the Goodyear 400, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on FS1, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, and MRN on the radio, and streaming in-car cameras on Max.
Yeah, brought to you by Haas Avocado.
So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode of the show. I will just throw in another reminder for folks that maybe missed it. A couple weeks ago, we did an interview with Leah Blaney Reeves from the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation, where she talked about everything that was coming up with the foundation. You can find that on our Facebook page. You can find that on our YouTube channel. You could find it in your podcast channels as well, as if you just want to listen to the audio one. But go back and give that a listen, because they're ramping up things ahead of the Pickle for a Purpose event in May, and they have some opportunities for fans to get involved, especially with that Wall of Fame opportunity that they have there. So go ahead and check that out and check out everything else they have to do. So thank you everyone again. Thank you everyone once again for tuning into this episode of the Team Blaney podcast. During the week and on race day, you can find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search for Team Blaney. Again, we'd also like to encourage you to support the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation. Ryan's official charitable organization benefits brain health causes like UPMC Sports Medicine and the Alzheimer's Association. To learn more, visit ryanblaneyfamilyfoundation.org or follow them on any of their social media channels like on Facebook, X, and Instagram. But for now, and for my co-host Steve Mez, I'm Adam Rogers. We'll catch you next time right here on the Team Blaney podcast.
Good night, Manitoba. Check out the TikTok. Brought to you by Haas Avocados.